Here we are back again for another episode of Chasing Labels, spine number 35, guys. Yeah, we do spine numbers here. I'm Stephen Billings, and my co-host, as always, with me is Andrew Cabral. How you doing, man?
Doing well. It feels like we were just here very, very recently, so this is a quick turnaround for us.
It is a quick turnaround. Usually we do like a Sunday episode, but this is the guests we have today. They're from another country, so they're messing us up. I can't believe it. They should live closer so that this could be a more appropriate time. But
yeah, we should all be on the same timeline.
Yeah. But we are joined by some. We're honored to have these guests on because if you've listened to the show, we're big fans. We praise their stuff all the time, and it's just now we're going to be able to pick their brains and get all the dirty stuff out. We're going to get all the... No, I'm just kidding.
No, just kidding.
But we are joined by the co-founders of Powerhouse Indicator, Sam Dunn and John Morrissey. How you guys doing?
We're doing great. Yeah, it's Friday night. Great. It's 7:30 our time. Yeah. The weekend's just starting for us.
John's got his eye on the pub. Yeah,
I've got my eye on the pub. Yeah,
he does.
Well, you can drink during the show if you want. I mean, if you want to get sloppy during the show, we're not going to.
I noticed that, Sam. Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah,
sneaky.
He's drinking. Yeah.
Yeah, sneaky done. Yeah.
But we appreciate you guys taking the time to talk with us. I know a lot of our listeners are going to be really excited to hear what you guys have to say about Indicator and beyond. So I guess let's start out by just getting a little bit of your background. I know some of this, you guys have probably been on some other podcasts and maybe some people have heard some of this stuff, but just quickly, give us a little bit of your backgrounds, each of you, and the rise to where Indicator is now. So we'll start with you, Sam.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thanks for having us. It's really great to be here and to have just chatted with you guys and to get to know you. Thanks a lot for that. Yeah. The background, I mean, there's the pre-industry stuff, which is where all my love of cinema started, which was really less going to the cinema and more to do with, really interesting programming on the TV, that really hooked me when I was very young, especially for anyone who knows anything about UK TV broadcasting, the arrival of Channel 4, some of the kind of really neatly curated seasons that were on the BBC. And then, I started collecting VHS and then DVD kind of came on the horizon. And then around that time, I went from being someone who was studying at university and doing a bit of lecturing and looking after the video library. And then I thought, hey, man, maybe I should get a proper job, So then I sent some CVs out to some of the great labels that I loved at the time, Tartan Video, Artificial Eye, other people like this, just with no idea whether I could land a job or not. And somehow miraculously, all to do with timing, really, because I had no experience. I had some film knowledge, but no experience. I ended up working at Tartan. So that's where I started. And that would be about 22 years ago, really just at this near the start of DVD. So we were still producing VHS then. So I literally just didn't know. I mean, as I say, I knew film, but I didn't know how to make them. I didn't know. So I just learned really fast, worked all the hours that God sent, and did sort of 8 or 9 years there, worked my way up into a kind of management position. And then, but again, really fortuitous in terms of timing, because actually Tartan didn't last long after I left, but I got a job heading up the BFI's video and DVD department. And again, was there for about 8 or 9 years. And then at some point, John, who I knew, and he'll give you some background about where he's been, because he's been there and done it. He's really worked in all the great studios and companies. But at the time, he was working for Sony, and he, for one reason or another, was just about to leave there, and called me up for a drink because we knew each other well, and said, "Hey, do you fancy starting a label up?" And
oh man,
the rest is kind of history, really.
That's like the end of a great episode of TV, and then it's like cuts it at the end, and then that's where it ends in the bar. Yeah.
So the BFI at that time was having a kind of, what would you call it? There were redundancies on the horizon, and I threw my hat in the ring, and I managed to. Yeah, I was lucky enough for them, in a way, lucky to be made redundant, but they accepted that, and I got a little bit of money as a payout, which just helped me tied through that kind of difficult time when you're setting something up. So yeah, that's probably quite long-winded, but that's the
no, you're good.
Relatively short version. So yeah, John can give you his story.
Yeah, in a way, it's quite a similar story. You know, I was born in Ireland, and I spent a lot of time in Ireland when I was a kid. And I don't know how we ever did it, and it's so vivid, the memories. I used to sneak into the cinema with my friends and my family, and I used to go and watch Hammer films, when I was like 13 and 14 years of age, and that was just, for me, I was agog at these fantastic movies, and had the bug. I wasn't in an era where there was lots of home entertainment. It was 3 or 4 channels at most in the UK. So I think, yeah, very similar to Sam. We both got a great love of film and music as well. And for me, I was very, very lucky. I managed to get a job with MGM in 1984, I think it was, and that was just at the start of the VHS Betamax wars. And we know who won that one. And just was in that. I've been in that home entertainment arena since then. Really, I think the biggest job I had was I was sales and marketing director at Columbia Pictures, which was when I first joined, and then became Sony. And so I've been around. I've worked for the studios, and I've also worked for some really good independents, Vestron Video, who I'm sure you guys might have heard of. Dirty Dancing was the one that really put them on the map.
Oh yeah.
And so I've worked both sides really of the frustrations of working for the Hollywood studio, and then the great thing about working for an independent. And obviously, I think the great thing from both both of our point of view, myself and Sam, we're the decision makers. It's not, there's not another 4 or 5 people you have to run it past. We make the decisions on a day-to-day basis, and it is fantastic. We just we get on with it. We know what we need to do. We know what we like, and I think that's been a huge benefit in achieving what we've achieved in, the 5.5 years that we've been going.
Yeah, I was gonna say, in the sense of like some of the major players in the boutique label game, you guys are pretty young, but I think you guys have risen pretty fast. I think if you talk to a lot of guys like us, we would put you guys pretty near if not the top. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and just, toot your horns, just to make just because you guys are here, but I'm just saying legitimately, like, you guys have risen really quickly, and I think people have a lot of respect for the stuff you guys are doing over there. And I just think that, it's amazing. It's amazing that in this day and age, when people would say physical media is on the way out, you guys have started something and then gotten very popular very fast. And how does that feel to be getting that far along so quickly?
I think if we'd have stood outside the Bricklayers Arms, which is the pub that we met to get this thing going, I said, what do you want to achieve in the first 5 years? I mean, I don't think we'd have been anywhere near Sam, would we, guessing, where we'd end up. And it is great, we do get a lot of feedback from the States, and there's the odd poll that comes in at the end of the year. And, we've been really pleased that we've figured quite well in those polls. So it's I mean, for all Sam's hard work that he puts in, I think it's quite rewarding to see that, that does happen, and, you can actually make a difference. And, that's certainly what's happened. I think, we've exceeded our expectations. I think I'd be reasonable enough to say that, I think.
Yeah. And, part of what you're just saying there, where you're talking about, feedback from the US, I think it was a very awesome move of you guys starting to venture more out into doing, U.S. accessible titles. I mean, of course, a lot of us have region-free players. We're not worried about that, but there are a lot of people that can't, they're not going that far for that kind of stuff. And you guys have decided to start, opening up, expanding, and now you guys are releasing, region-free titles, a lot more region-free titles. So, was that a response you guys got, a part of that decision to do that? Was that a lot more people in the States are noticing your stuff and that you needed to open it up more?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think, we could see, I mean, it's hard to be absolute about the exact numbers, but certainly you could look at the sales that were happening both kind of direct through the Linewood Media guys or even kind of get a sense from Amazon that there was obviously a significant proportion of what was being sold was going overseas.
Yeah.
As I say, to be scientific about it is difficult, but anecdotally, we were kind of thinking, well, maybe it is something like a third, and that's not us being in any way proactive and trying to kind of reach that audience. So I guess we figured, well, how amazing, how lucky we are that there's a kind of groundswell of interest, and that there's a wide sort of base of people who are taking an interest in what we're doing or what we're trying to achieve. And so we figured, well, if those guys are there, let's see if we can kind of make it easier for them to get to the product, and maybe that would help. Maybe I don't know, maybe there'd be a word of mouth that would happen on the ground, in the US. That's kind of, I think, happened here in the UK, which has really helped. The kind of progression that we've had and the kind of success that you've alluded to, for which we're incredibly grateful. So I think, if we can, we put a lot of effort into our releases, and I just think it'd be nice to be able to reach as wide an audience as possible, and to continue, growing what we're doing.
Yeah,
I think there was a real moment, and this was the moment that really changed a lot for us. In the first deal that we did with Sony Pictures, the first deal we did, all were region free. And that really meant that we could get to so many people. Obviously, things have changed since then. And, a lot of the deals we do, we're very controlled because, we're buying the rights for the UK in most cases. I think that has changed now. But initially, the Sony deal allowed us to spread the word. And after that, it got a bit tougher. So thankfully, that first, I can't remember, it was 70 or 80 titles, I think, that we had were all region free. And obviously, when we had to change and then we reverted back, then, obviously a lot of people said, hang on, they've all been region free. Why have you changed? And it was just unfortunate. I think we because of our success, it caused a few problems and it ruffled a few feathers. And we had to, unfortunately, the studios cut back a little bit on allowing us to do that. But I think, certainly that was the catalyst to us really getting the word out there, them first 70 or 80 titles.
Yeah. Andrew, did you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just waiting for Stephen to go through.
I got more to ask. I've got way more to ask.
Yeah.
But I was going to let you get in there.
Yeah, Stephen and I are very yin-yang when it comes to our approaches to the show. Stephen is more prepared. I'm more cavalier. I'm very much...
Well, I don't know about that. I'm good at talking to people.
Right.
Maybe that's what it is. I'm good at the interview part.
Well, I just meant in terms of preparation, in terms of having a list of interview questions. I'm more going off of the feel.
Actually, I'm not. I said I was going to do
We
questions.
almost sound like a married couple, don't we?
Yeah.
Well,
we've been doing it for so long.
We've been doing this for about 4 years now. So.
Yes, I can tell.
Yeah.
We can tell.
But the thing is I told him I was going to have some questions prepared, and I don't. I have notes from 5 episodes ago sitting next to me, so I don't really have it. I'm just going and swinging it.
Very much so. Taking kind of out of something from my playbook, but it's just very interesting hearing the origins of of Powerhouse Films and everything, because for me personally, and I think for Stephen as well, it was kind of word of mouth that brought the company to our attention. It was other collectors talking about them, talking about the early releases from your catalog, circa 2016 or so. And it was really just people slowly, more and more people talking about it, and then just grows and grows and manifests got to the point where I don't want to miss out on something great that's going on. So I really, really wanted to get in on all the good stuff that was happening. And like you said, John, just looking at the early releases from your catalog is our Sony releases. And it's just kind of interesting with your background with Columbia Pictures and Sony and all of that you were able to kind of get just right off the bat and have a bedrock of great catalog titles, just really staples of Columbia's back catalog, which is great for people who like to collect older films. Usually when it comes to the physical media market, it's tough for those films to get attention. And I think what's really great with Indicator and with Powerhouse Films is you pay attention to a lot of the back catalog, the deeper catalog of stuff that people either may already be aware of and will want, higher quality releases of, or two may not be aware of, and they're kind of hidden gems, which I think is also important. That seems to be a continued moniker of Powerhouse Films. And I think what really helps as well is just, what we've learned here early on in the episode is uh, and what we've seen, I think, throughout many of the boutique label companies from all the guests we've had on, is it all starts with a love of movies, a love of cinema. And it goes from the very young age. And we see how that translates into, very much, success when it comes to all of these things. And I just find that to be a very interesting through line through all of this. Um, when it comes to just the timeline of everything, was starting off of Powerhouse, did it start in kind of the early 2010s? Because I think your first releases were in 2016, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll just give you a very funny little story that when we were outside the Bricklayers Arms having our third or fourth pint, and I said to Sam, look, I'm going to get this list of titles, which Sam said, okay, well, they don't normally license their products anyway. We managed to get the list, and I sent this huge list off to Sam to look through. And I thought, oh, God, yeah, that's going to take him 3 or 4 days to have a look through, and then, send me his wish list back. 8 o'clock the following morning, there's Sam's wish list. He must have gone through that list, which was enormous. And by the next morning, this is where we got to start. He said, I went, okay, that's where we go. And that's the kind of enthusiasm. And I think we started with, literally hours later, we had this list. I mean, I have to say there was one person in particular that was an old colleague of mine, a guy called Aidan Colburn. And really, he was the big plus for us that, it was somebody I knew. And we managed to get the deal over the line, maybe a little bit easier because of that. So we're very grateful to him.
Well, yeah, I mean, having so much experience already, both of you within the industry, you kind of knew the ins and outs and kind of how things work. And I'm assuming that licensing deals and distribution deals are very complicated, to say the least, especially if you're thinking of branching out internationally. And that's where we were talking about the region free versus the region locked, which is, up here on the show, we're always trying to kind of point out where the movies are available and how they are available. And, because a lot of these movies do get multiple releases, and we're trying to give our audiences and all audiences saying that, not all of the releases may be the same. It may be, they're not all created equal, for example, I mean, just your version of Lady from Shanghai is different than the Lady from Shanghai that was put out here years ago. And it's all about kind of, I think, education and informing, because people will say, hey, there's this company called Indicator or Powerhouse Film. I've never heard of them before. Why is their edition of, Christine better than the one we have here? Why is their edition of whatever it may be is better than we have here? And I think it's just nice that there seems to be an education level amongst collectors that I think are just for everyone, kind of like a community vibe that we've talked about a few times before. And when it comes to, I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but just interesting stuff that we've touched on the show recently is that I think the company has started to do their own remastering and restorations and things like that. And I think that's something that you've kind of ventured out towards now in your more recent titles. Because for one thing I've noticed over the years is when it comes to Sony's back catalog, and John, you'll probably know this as well, they seem to take very good care of their film elements. They constantly are on the forefront of preservation and restoration and keeping things, healthy when it comes to that department. So venturing out into that area yourselves, have you kind of, taken from what you've seen in the past and kind of attributed it to what you're doing now?
I guess I'm going to answer this question directly in a minute, but I guess part of leading up to answering it with kind of some kind of greater meaning is also to talk about the whole endeavor. And you've sort of touched upon this about, I think you've said that there's a quality sort of level to our releases. And I think, another key part of our origin story is the people who we have both at the start and over the years got to join the team. So although John and I are obviously the founders, and we were there from the get-go, negotiating for, I think it took 6 months with Sony, and it kind of oscillated between, can you come and do this for us, and looking at us as if to say, you really think some of these titles are going to sell, and but a key part of what Indicator always has been ever since the beginning is a guy called Nick Wrigley. Now, Nick is the founder of Masters of Cinema, which is Eureka's imprint. And one way and another, Nick kind of moved out of that space after enjoying huge success with the label, and just decided to kind of call it a day, go out on a high note. But when I was at the BFI, I did this huge kind of collection of Alan Clark films that we licensed from the BFI. And I kind of got Nick, as it were, it felt like a little bit out of retirement, to come and do the artwork for that. And, the point at which John and I set this thing up, and we had this deal kind of about to drop with Sony, and we were, really in it, and like we were taking the risk. There was some financial kind of weight on us, and we really had to kind of get thinking about how we were going to pull this all together. Nick was key, the discussions that we would have with him about the look and the feel. And I guess ultimately, then we start to get other people joining and working with us, and they're all people that we've known for many, many years. But the key factor, and this is where I hope I'm going to start answering the question, is that they all just not only love film, but they love physical media. Okay, so basically, when we're producing an edition, we're going, how would we want it? That's the mark. That's the measure. Where if we were to receive this, would we be pleased? Would we be slightly underwhelmed? And that goes from everything from the kind of the tactile parts, the packaging, the design, through to what's on the disc and what's in the booklet, and hopefully how well proofed those things are, and whether the subtitles are accurate. We almost go too far. We're almost too kind of obsessive about the detail. But I hope that that's part and parcel of what people are responding to. I hope they're saying, these guys care, therefore, we can care. I think there will be.
They are.
Yeah, I can say from firsthand experience.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, there's nothing more. I mean, thankfully there are lots of other companies who have an equally high quality threshold, but there's nothing more kind of dismaying of getting a film that you really, really want, and somehow there's just some way in which it falls short, and knowing, well, actually that's not going to get a decent edition for another 5 years or 7 years or whatever it might be, or even maybe never, if the cycle of physical media starts to dwindle, which obviously at the moment it doesn't really show any immediate signs, not in this boutique space anyway. But anyway, sorry, to come back to your question more directly, we didn't know. I guess John and I figured we might, with a good wind and with some positive reception to what we're doing, start to generate the kind of revenues and therefore profit, and have a decent cash flow to be able to cash flow through restoration, which is an expensive business.
Yes.
If you're going to do it well and not just use someone who can kind of do you a job, but kind of with maybe lacking the quality part. But we kind of, I think, I can't quite remember, time's a bit difficult to sort of think about exactly when things happen, but I think maybe like 3-4 years ago we did a couple of restorations. I think we did things like The Missionary and Judith Hearn, and then suddenly we had a year when we did 15, and the fruits of that kind of investment and time spent and energy are starting to sort of come out around now. So the January titles, all 4 of those are new restorations that we did. February, I think the same, and so on and so forth. So more and more we're seeing titles where we have been responsible for the restoration, and currently we're doing a lot. I mean, John and I, we've taken on quite a lot of 4K end-to-end restoration.
Yes.
We've got a whole catalog we're going to be announcing towards the end of the year, as well as just the kind of, well, it's funny because those restorations which are 2K are starting to feel like, well, that's the easy stuff, right? That's it's the 4K stuff that is like, but yeah, I mean, I think we were immensely proud of that, because it also comes back to something else you've said, which is the unlocking of the heritage, that those films that haven't had either any kind of release or any release of any kind of significance or seriousness of intent. Maybe they just used an old master or a TV master or something, and our whole well, I suppose in a nutshell, what I would say is one significant part of what our whole existence is all about is shining a light on these things that are just hidden in the shadows and being eclipsed by the bigger films, the films in the canon. And that's it's a bit risky, because from time to time people will say, well, why are you doing this, or what is it? But our hope is that people will kind of go on this journey with us and at least know that what they will get is a quality edition. And if they immerse themselves in it, then they'll hopefully find something that will kind of turn them on, or that they'll enjoy, or maybe just learn.
Yeah. Now, the one thing I wanted to kind of connect back a little bit to the expanding the U.S. also, and along with this, is when you've decided that you're going to start trying to do more region-free stuff, is that affecting kind of what films you're looking for also? Because, of course, there's the idea that, some films you can release in the UK, or, but there's some that might also have like a separate release in the US where you can't do both. Is that affecting how you're picking movies, or is that really not a factor and you're just like, hey, if I can get it just in the UK, that's fine. If I can get it in both, that's great. But getting it in the UK is kind of like, since that's your home, that's the most important thing.
No, I think the way we've looked at it really is where we can, and obviously January, because it's taken us a while to get to where we are to this point. We've been talking about it for such a long time, but we needed all our ducks in a row, and I think we've got a schedule going forward that's where each month is the same in both territories, and I think that's the ideal scenario for us. So that's it. Just purely from the point of view of getting so many releases out, and if you had to do 4 for the UK and 4 just for the US, that system just really wouldn't work. And from our point of view, it's helping us to talk to a few more people as well. I think we noticed a difference in attitudes when we announced that we were coming into the US with our releases. And one particular studio, we definitely had a different meeting with them than we had previously. So yeah, it's key that we try where we can now to release in both territories at the same time. So that's I think there are going to be some exceptions where the deals that we had in place pre what we're doing, and that's unfortunate. In fact, we've got some titles where we'll only be releasing them in the US and not in the UK.
Okay.
So that'll be an interesting scenario. So yeah, but we're all most of the people we're speaking to now going forward. It's can we have the details of the rights for both territories?
Yeah. And the other thing I was thinking about too is like you've talked about how you guys are trying to shed the light on hidden gems and things that maybe people are not aware of. Does a lot of that go from your own personal movie watching, or do you feel like even now currently you're still looking for things that even you don't even have in your mind catalog of things you want to show people? Do you still like kind of seek out hidden gems as currently?
Sam does that all the time. He comes out with these massive curveballs, and I go, really? Yeah, and you'll find out in the next Indicator newsletter, one of them that I think is going to make people really sit up and go, wow, that's and that was all Sam's idea of Sam's knowledge of film is far more experienced than I am, and he noticed there's another project that we started, or Sam talked me through it from very early days. And that's a project that's taken years to get together, and that we'll be announcing that later in the year. And there's another gem that people are just going to be jaw dropped in when they see what this kind of product is. And Sam is a real keen eye for stuff that is not particularly well known. But I think people will, when they see what it is, they'll go, okay. So yeah, he's got a keen eye for that stuff.
Yeah, I've got generally a bit of a bee in my bonnet about the films that kind of just fall away and get forgotten, and just I mean, sometimes perhaps there's a reason, maybe they're just not that great, but I think in general there's usually something very interesting about most movies, and there's something unfair about this idea that there's this canon and those are the only films that anyone should ever be interested in. And I think there are different viewers who have different attitudes, and we all only have so much time, and I guess it's all about the degree of your interest and perhaps how adventurous you are, what your tastes are. And there's always going to be this taste aspect, which is a difficult. You can't really what would be the word? You can't plan for that part.
Yeah.
But I think in general, I think I would like to think that, if not always, for the most part, the things that we release are really rather extraordinary. It's just whether you can get over that hurdle of, I mean, it's a tough market, really. In there's so much stuff every month. I mean, I really don't know how people keep up, but it's extraordinary to see people actually continuing to keep up and being so engaged and so interested. And he's hoping that those people, and I count myself in this. I've got lots of films I haven't kind of had the time to watch, or at least Blu-ray editions of, and I'm kind of looking forward to having the time to just sit down and watch them all.
Of course, it's a key for a lot of us collectors. Yeah, and I think the key for you guys is you guys have I think have gotten a lot of loyalty through what you've done so far, and I think I don't want to get into this too deep until the end, because we're going to talk about your new releases. But I think with your new releases is I think another step in expanding what it means to be part of the Indicator brand, and also like let's see where that loyalty goes. You know what I mean? Because I think with your new releases, you're stepping into a little bit different realm that I don't think people expected.
Yeah,
that's right.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and
I think they proved to be
like
quite
I said,
controversial.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
In some ways. I think they proved to be quite controversial. And I mean, I know we're going to come back to it at the end, and we can talk about it more there. But I think we always knew that it wasn't going to be just a straightforward, oh great, for some people. But we could maybe run through some of the reasons why we've decided to give them the attention that we have later.
Oh yeah, we will. And I think that for me personally, and I try to tell this to our audience a lot on here, is that for me personally, because we talk about other labels like Severance or like a Vinegar Syndrome, where they doing like exploitative stuff and things that maybe most people wouldn't consider to be high art or anything like that. And I always tell people, like, look, have an open mind, because for me, I treat my film buying a little bit more like an archive than it is necessarily only putting the stuff on the shelf I think is good. I like to have a little bit of everything. I like to have things that I might even not consider to be a good movie. But there's something about it historically that it contributes to film in a way that I find valuable. And I get it on my shelf because it's important in that way. Because I think you can't have, as they say, you can't have any sunny days without some rainy days. And, having that full spectrum of cinema on your shelf is important for me, because if I'm going to show somebody movies, I want to show them everything. And, So,
yeah.
But,
I concur, definitely.
Yeah, that's
good.
And
just going back to your point, Stephen, about the, I guess, the Indicator clientele, customer, whatever. I mean, it is quite amazing. I deal with a lot more probably of the customers than Sam does. And the same names crop up every month. And I have dialogue with a lot of them, and it's an amazingly quite incredible, loyal base of people. And obviously, like yourself, obviously you approached us. I mean, I know that you're an avid collector of our product. I see your name pop up each month. And
sorry, man. I didn't mean to complain about that. No, I'm just kidding.
But we do it. We genuinely do appreciate, which is why, when you asked us to do this, why shouldn't we do it? We can fit the time in, and the same with the guys in Australia who chased us and said, "Look, would you do it?" And we said, "Absolutely." It's nice for us to be able to put a message across, if you like, and for people to know about a bit more about the company and how it was founded, and we've sort of done all that today as well.
Yeah, we're hoping this is going to end up on some like Blu-ray someday. Like we're recording this now,
right.
and there's the documentary about physical media, and this ends up on as a special feature someday.
Yeah.
So, but
and then you could do a commentary on top of it as well.
I'm going to do a commentary to the already thing that's like a commentary.
Kind of
win-win.
Yeah, it's really. It's kind of like the Not Quite Hollywood exploitation documentary, which snippets of it just keep coming up on every company seems to be taking that and just using it. And it's like you can assemble the whole kind of documentary.
Yeah. A lot of them umbrella releases are using a lot of that documentary.
Well, I know the Indicator release of Road Games, which I think was the first time we had brought it up. Yeah,
it's a great release. But anything else you want to ask before we transition into our normal show, so we can so we don't keep these guys too long. I mean, we can
I'm
do this
good.
all day, but I know John needs to get to the pub. He needs to get some drinks in.
I know we're about 35 minutes in right now, so I think it's a good time to start transitioning into the main bulk of the show, so we don't keep these guys here much longer because the time difference and whatnot. So, Stephen, how do you want to transition? Where does one want to venture now?
Okay, so you guys ready to talk some Blu-ray releases? I know you don't. Sam, you're gonna get all these right. You're gonna know every one of these releases.
Do what I can. I mean, thankfully there's so much stuff coming out. Even I'm surprised from time to time. So yeah,
he better had, otherwise he's in trouble.
Yeah. I didn't
Our
bring you here for nothing.
reputation's on the line here, Sam. Our reputation's on the line, Sam.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's start with some Warner Archive. We have 3 releases for Warner Archive. You want to run them down for us, Andrew?
Yeah, certainly do. So Warner Archive is once again coming back, and their slate is once again delivered, and it looks like a really good slate. So first up, and certainly perhaps the most notable, is A Star Is Born from 1937, starring Janet Gaynor and Frederick March, is getting a re-release. This time, although it's getting a brand new 4K scan from its original nitrate Technicolor camera negatives. That's a mouthful to say. And I'm shocked that they still have those elements available after all these years, because those original nitrate Technicolor stuff, kind of disappeared along the way. And that's the original film for anyone listening at home.
The original Star Is Born. Yeah.
The original Star Is Born.
Yeah.
That's the one that kind of started all. Of course, there's been subsequent.
There's like 3 or 4 sequels. I don't know. Something like
the
that.
1954 one with, of course, Judy Garfield. Not Judy Garland. Yeah, Judy Garfield. I had John Garfield on the mind. I don't know why. But Judy Garland, and then, of course, Barbara Streisand, Chris Christopherson in the 70s, and then we got the more modern one from a few years ago.
I think that did really well, didn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Very
That did
popular.
pretty good. Yeah.
Very popular. It took a lot from the previous iterations and kind of meshed it together. But not to be undone, we're getting another thing that's a bit of an interesting outlier is a kind of 2-disc deluxe edition of The Wonderful World of the Brothers Grimm. But this is presented in the 2 different versions: the restored Cinerama image letterboxed version, and the restored Cinerama image in the Smilebox format, which is the kind of curved aspect ratio of that. Once upon a time here, we did a whole episode of our previous iteration of our podcast called Cinema Discovery Project, where we talked about Cinerama and kind of the uniqueness of that and why it was developed, and kind of how it's kind of one of those things in the 50s and 60s to get audiences back into the theater. So that's very interesting. And then lastly, but of course not least, is Captains of the Clouds, another Technicolor film starring the great James Cagney, and is done by Michael Curtiz. The great Michael Curtiz, who has, I think, 179 directorial credits. Something absurd.
I mean, his stuff shows up everywhere.
Yeah.
God, I mean,
it's just an amazing 50-year-long career of just, incredible stuff. And this is also getting a 4K scan of the original nitrate Technicolor camera negatives. They had those in the archive somewhere after all these years.
So you anything about start with Sam. What do you guys think about any of these stand out to you?
Hats off. They're just incredible, aren't they? Taking all this time, going back to these lovely original elements. The extras look fantastic on them. The Lux Radio Theatre versions, and so on and so forth. But I love this idea on the Brothers Grimm of having the 2 discs. It's such a nice idea, and having the Roadshow version as well. Which is the Smile box version, but with the overture, intermission, entree act, and exit music. Which is kind of, we grapple with some of that when we did Sweet Charity.
Yeah,
we wanted to release the full Roadshow version.
I wasn't going to bring it up because
I know
sucks,
it hurt a little bit because we had spent a lot of time putting it together, and it was a thing to behold, to have all of that, the music in the right place. But we were thwarted on that one. We really tried, but it's just so nice to see studios really understanding what they've got and understanding what it is that people want when they get editions of films. And just this idea, the thing that I alluded to earlier, that every time something is released, if it's not done right, you feel such dismay because you're going to have to wait like 5 to 7 years for it to really be done properly, unless someone picks it up in another territory and takes the time and effort. But to see the studio doing it themselves across all of these is it's just great. This is what people want, and it's great to see that the studios understand that. With all these featurettes and so on. So yeah, great, lovely, amazing. I can't wait to see the wonderful worlds of the Brothers Grimm, especially. I think.
Okay, John, you got anything to add?
No, I just add to that. It's fantastic that Warner's are doing this. If you look at the kind of product that we've been putting out, that obviously the noir series that we did. I mean that the response.
Wait a second, you did. You're doing more, right?
Oh yeah,
I'm doing more. Did I? Yeah, I did. I saw
don't scare me like that. I want more noir. Yeah. We want more noir. There's going to be more noir, right?
And there's going to be
more noir.
Yeah, and you can just see from the consumer, that era of film, people absolutely love it, don't they? It's just, and if it's done well, and everything, all the extras are great, the qualities, I mean it's what customers want, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's great that they've because I think one thing that whilst we're a little bit competitive with all the other labels, there's nothing better than seeing a roster of great product be coming out, because it grows the market. People don't get bored, don't switch off. They want to keep coming back, and there's another great release this month and another great release this month. So it helps grow that market for everybody. So I think we're never of the opinion that more of this kind of stuff doesn't work and help the industry.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, that's the Warner titles, and now let's move on over to the Eureka titles. We got 3 different releases, and one of them is a three movie set. The first one we got here is Dreadnought, which is a film from 1981. And then we have a film called Knockabout, which is from 1979. And then we have a 3-movie set called Three Monster Tales of Sci-Fi Terror, which includes films called The Monolith Monsters. We also have Man-Made Monster, and then we also have the third one, which I'm going to find eventually when I see it here.
Oh, wow.
Monster on Campus, yes.
Yeah.
Which is directed by Jack Arnold, which is the one I'm most excited to check out because I like Jack Arnold stuff. Andrew, what do you think about this slate?
Well, yeah, this is a smaller slate from Eureka, not uncommon for them, and they're staying within like kind of their wheelhouse when it comes to both Dreadnought and Knockabout. Knockabout, I was lucky enough to watch before the show today, and it's directed by Sammo Hung, whom of course we've seen so much of his work come out recently through various studios, 88 Films, Arrow, Eureka, and this film is put out by Golden Harvest. It was a Golden Harvest film at the time, and it's a great kung fu action comedy film. It has great choreography. It's rather entertaining. It's cool, like 95 minutes long. It's just so entertaining.
That's the sweet spot. You get a movie that's like hour and a half, a bunch of people kicking ass. I mean, that's exactly right there. That's it right there.
That's exactly. You can't really beat that. And I'm digging it because they're putting out so much of that kung fu 70s back catalog. And it's really stuff that I think a lot of people are talking about. There's a lot of buzz about these releases. I know they sell out quick, so I know people are buying them.
But that sci-fi set's interesting. That sci-fi monster set, because it's. I mean, I know every once in a while they'll put out something like this, but I was looking into these, and that. Like I said, that last one, that the Monster on Campus looks really interesting.
Yeah,
I think it's on Tubi right now. So if you guys want to go watch it, you can go watch it on Tubi.
Yeah, it's first. It looks like the first one came out in 1941, Man-Made Monster, but the other two are 57 and 58, which is right in that realm of atomic age sci-fi, which is something I'm always fascinated with.
Yeah, but John, anything here look interesting to you?
I have to say I have a soft spot for Eureka. We really like those guys. We're on their mailing list, so we do get the product from them, and it's always the one I quite look forward to each month. I have to say, when they arrive, I think, wow, yeah, there's some great stuff. I mean, some of that stuff I don't know, but that's a great thing about Eureka. There's a lot of the stuff that arrives, and I watch it, and I think, wow, just I really like the label a lot.
Yeah. Sam.
Yeah, I mean, echoing exactly what John's saying. This is what they do so well. They're really giving the consumer the definitive editions. They're really mining down to make sure they've got the original Cantonese mono tracks, and and
yes.
And I think even on one of their earlier editions, they kind of did the authentic, terribly rendered original subtitles as one of the options. These are lovely ideas, and to kind of make it the definitive edition. I mean, oh look,
I love that stuff. I love
John splashing his Eureka edition.
Buster.
Nice.
I love what they do with Buster Keaton. I'm just a massive fan of the Buster Keaton stuff they do.
For the audience, John's showing off his Buster Keaton collections from Master of Cinema and all that stuff.
Yeah.
The thing is, I missed out on the first volume, but I have the other ones. Yeah.
Yeah, Eureka has been around for a very long time. I remember over a decade ago just starting to dabble into international releases, and they were around back then, and they've been still doing great stuff. And just for everyone at home, both Dreadnought and Nakabot are both getting 2K restorations of the film, so they're going to look really good.
And multiple cuts as well.
And like always, their artwork is.
Knockabout has a couple of different cuts of the movie as well.
Yes.
Just digging into the history, understanding the history, presenting all of these versions to make it definitive. It's fantastic and great archival interview material.
Yeah.
They're not shirking their responsibility here. They're really taking it seriously and giving the consumer, I think, exactly what they want.
Yeah, they're not, and both of those they both have 2 new audio commentaries, which there's usually only one if you're lucky, and if it's new, but now you're getting 2 new ones, so it's great packages all around.
Yeah, I was gonna say in the artwork, especially on that monster one, that looks amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get them while they're hot. They'll be gone.
Yeah, definitely.
I have to say, I met obviously the founder of the company, Ron Benson, many right in the early days of when it, and there's no more enthusiastic guy about all the restoration stuff, and he was just he was a lovely man, and
he really was.
The thing is, if you got in conversation with him, you have to write off the day, really. It's just he's so enthusiastic.
So we need to. Is he still with us?
He's not.
No, unfortunately, he died a few years ago.
We got to get him on here. We'll do a 5-hour.
Yeah. Unfortunately, his daughter runs the company now, but
nice.
he's a super nice guy. Yeah,
he really was.
Nice.
He was great guy.
All right. Well, that's the Eureka slate, and now let's move on to our next slate, which is always a big slate, and that's from our guys over in Australia, Via Vision, or Imprint Films, and they got a huge slate of, I think, 7 films, Andrew?
Yeah,
6.
Yeah, it's always it's always a large slate. Let me see 7. If I can count.
7.
Is it 7? Okay.
Yeah, it's 7. So we got 1981's Cutter's Way. We also have 1973's The Wicker Man, which, I think that's one people are going to be jumping after because it's in a nice little box. We'll get to that in a second. But we also have the Counterfeit Trader from 1962. We have the 1968's The Brotherhood. And then we have Across 110th Street. And then we have The Dawn is Dead in 1973. And then we have Man on a Swing from 1974. So we got a lot of 70s stuff. You guys are familiar with this area. So
I mean, how many people do they employ? Several hundred?
It's got to be.
You get so many. We employ a reasonable amount of people to get our full releases out a month. These guys are putting out 7. Quite incredible.
And it makes me think about Kino, because we talk about it's like a running joke because Kino's got stuff dropping like every day. And it's like they must have an army. I mean, it's but it's there's some interesting releases here. I got to check. I got a chance to. I mean, I've seen The Wicker Man, and we'll get to that in a second. But I watched the movie Man on a Swing from 1974, and that is a interesting film about a cop. I think it's Cliff Robertson is the lead actor in that film. And in this movie, cops can just drink beer anywhere they want. Like I'm telling you, you watch the whole movie, they're drinking Budweisers at work, they're drinking Budweisers at home, they're drinking them while they're driving, and that's how cops are back in this movie. But it's about this. There's a murder, this girl, and this psychic guy comes into play and says, starts to know information about the case, and he worms his way in, and then the cop starts to like think that maybe he was involved, and it's some interesting performances too. And it's I liked it. I think I'm going to pick this one up. Anybody else seen anything from this slate?
Yeah, no, I just want to chime in and say that I agree about Man on a Swing. Man on a Swing is directed by Frank Perry, who's a filmmaker we have a lot of love for in here in the I was going to say, but also as a company, we've got a few of his coming up. And I actually picked this up when Olive did it a few years back, the US edition. Great film, but yeah, I mean, these guys, Via Vision, they're just so impressive. They're just incredibly impressive. They've really taken the kind of the boutique aesthetic, if that's a kind of forgivable phrase, and really, they really, again, I'm using the same phrase over and over again, but they just really understand what it is that people want when these kind of back catalogue, as it were, titles are given fresh treatment. If you're going to take the time to really invest in it, just the idea that there are, to go back, there's one of these 110th Street has 2 new commentaries on it. We were just remarking previously. That's wow. I mean, amazing value for money. Amazing that you could not only see decent versions of some of these films for the first time, at least in physical media terms, but then be able to go so deep and check out the archival documentaries about Anthony Quinn or whatever it is that they've all got. But wow, when you get to The Wicker Man, they've really, I mean, there are a few additions over time, right, of The Wicker Man. There've been many, but this looks pretty definitive. This could be the last place you ever need to go with this film.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, like you're saying, The Wicker Man, we got a 4-disc set here.
Yeah.
One of them being the soundtrack, and then you have the final cut on the first disc. You got the UK cut and the director's cut on the second disc, and then the third disc is just all bonus features. So, I mean, they really went all out. Of course, a very nice slip box, cigarette top box. It's an amazing release. John, anything to add on these?
Cutter's Way for me. I'm a big Jeff Bridges fan, and that was a film I saw when it first came out, and haven't seen it in a while, so that'd be be a good one to go back to, I think.
Yeah, Andrew.
Oh yeah, I'm just remarking. The Wicker Man obviously seems to be the headliner of this slate, just because it's sheer size of the set and just everything involved with it. Also the fact that it's a really great psychological cult, literal cult horror film from the 70s.
Folk horror, which I had to say real quick, I saw Sam on the folk horror set when I was watching the documentary. I saw you in there, so yeah.
And of course, the film stars the great Christopher Lee, whom I've always been a gigantic fan of, just a thespian of the highest regard. And this film I saw a few years ago, and it's still a haunting, just fever dream of a film. It's really something to behold, and it's really at the forefront, I think, of a lot of the more psychological horror that would come after it. Just kind of the dropping acid type of horror stuff, and just the aesthetic of the set I just love in general. Cutter's Way is also a film I've seen a couple of years ago, and don't currently own. So this would be definitely the addition to get, because we do get a new introduction by Jeff Bridges and new interview from screenwriters, and we get an audio commentary. And of course, this stars John Hurd, who passed away a few years ago, and he's fantastic in this film. It's really
he was absolutely.
Just I know a lot of people grew up knowing him as the dad from the Home Alone films, and it's like before that he was a great he's a great actor. And I'm excited about that. And more Anthony Quinn being put out in the world is never a bad thing. So I would always prefer that. Yeah. And there seems to be just a hint of kind of like the gangster film in a lot of these films. If you just one is literally called The Don Is Dead, literally a tie to the gangster film. And then one of these films is literally the plot of The Godfather, The Brotherhood. If you read the synopsis, it sounds very similar to the plot of The Godfather. And I just found that to be rather interesting, because considering that I think this movie came out in much earlier than The Godfather did. So I don't know if it was ever an influence on that film or maybe on the novel itself. I don't know. but that film stars Kirk Douglas, and yeah, this is another solid slate from Imprint. Really stuff that people may be aware of or may not know, and it looks like stuff that probably hasn't seen the light of day in high quality, at least from my brief knowledge of these titles.
Exactly. I mean, if you live in Australia and you're in any way interested in cinema, you are a lucky person. I think these guys are really, really kicking it.
Yeah, they've put out so much. And just as we talked about earlier, Indicator's been around for about 5 years now. I think Imprint's been around for 2. I think I don't even think it's been that long. Yeah. It's kind of been a whirlwind of just hit after hit when it comes to release months.
Yeah, very impressive. Very impressive.
All right. Well, I think we got one more label before we get to Indicator. So, guys, I know audience is getting all crazy. They're all foaming at the mouth to talk about Indicator releases. But we got one more slate to cover here, and that is the Arrow releases, which just dropped this morning of this recording. So,
yes,
we probably, unless somebody has, I think me and Andrew might have seen a couple of these, and I'm sure you guys too. But some of these I'm going to be very unfamiliar with because I have not looked at it at all. So, but we got a decent amount here. Arrow's been doing a lot of 4K releases with some of their past releases. So starting with that, we have 12 Monkeys, which, Terry Gilliam, Bruce Willis, really kind of an all-time, sci-fi, film that people, dystopian that people remember. Along with that, we got a 4K release of Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Then we also have the 8 Diagram Pole Fighter, and then we have a 2-film set called The Rogue Cops and the Racketeers, 2 crime thrillers from Enzo G. Castellari. So a couple of Italian crime films. And then the last one we have here, which it looks like they're going to be doing a series of, is films from Claude Cabral. Twisting the Knife, 4 films from Claude Cabral. And the 4 films, let me see if I can get them here, are the Swindle. We have, in disc 2, we have The Color of Lies. In disc 3, we got Nightcap. And in disc 4, we have The Flower of Evil. So they also have another set coming out, I think, here in the next month or so called Lies and Deceit, that are 5 films from Claude Cabral. So it seems that they've gotten a lot of rights to his films. So, starting with Sam, anything standing out here?
Well, the Cabral set, that's great. I think anyone, we love a good box set ourselves. And I think, part of the thinking with a box set is this great opportunity to bring the work of a single, whether it's a filmmaker or actor or whatever it is, something that links the films, and then just allow you to kind of explore that history, that trajectory. And Arrow, I just love Arrow. Arrow's box sets are a thing to behold. I got quite a few of them last year, and I just they're often the things that I dive into the soonest. Some of their Years of Lead last year was superb. I'm really looking forward to that. Everything that they turn their hand to is great. Their 4K editions, their UHDs are, I think, second to none. They're doing amazing work. Again, just hats off. I'm sure that every single one of them will tick all the boxes for anyone who's interested.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, no, totally agree with Sam. We know the guys quite well at Arrow. In fact, we've got a few of the guys who used to work there before, and there's not many that they don't bring out that's really 5-star really label. From our point of view, when we first started, they were sort of was a benchmark really that you've got to try and get to, isn't it? They've been around for a little while when we first started, and it was that was what we needed to achieve to get to that kind of level, really, and I think we probably have.
Yeah, Andrew, anything standing out here?
Oh yeah, the fact that they're putting out a second Claude Chabrol set is really something that's fascinating to me, just as a fan of the French New Wave, and Claude Chabrol really being at the forefront of that with, certain films we've seen put out by Criterion, like Le Beau Serge, like Le Cousin. And just to see that this is getting a really big deluxe set here, like an 80-page collector's books being thrown in here. There's new 4K restorations of The Swindle, Nightcap, and The Flower of Evil. So they're really going full tilt when it comes to those things. And I just love this box set. I like that they're all coming on separate discs as well. That's something I've always been a big fan of. Something I've always loved with Indicator. And I've always pointed out when I've done video reviews on the Chasing Labels YouTube channel is each movie comes in its own disc, in its own, digipack or case or whatever that may be. And a lot of people don't realize that putting multiple movies on one disc hurts the quality oftentimes. And so it's a small thing. It seems obvious, but it's very important, especially for a multi-disc box set of any kind. So that's really fantastic. Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer is a film that's talked about, constantly for the last 35 years since it came out, starring Michael Rooker. This getting a 4K release is surprising the heck out of me because it's a very aesthetically just nihilistic film. It really is.
Yeah.
So plain and so.
I think that's a real. It's very Arrow to really get something that really people really want. This is a film that people have been dying to get their hands on a decent version. I think it's Arrow just doing what they do so often, just really pleasing the punter.
Yeah. And Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer has been one of those films that has gotten Blu-ray releases before, but nothing like this.
No, exactly.
I think we've gotten two here, and we got one in 2009 and one in 2016, and obviously not to the extent of which I'm assuming they're going to take in giving this the rest that need. 4K restoration from the original camera negatives, approved by, I believe, the director. It says John McNaughton. And it's a 2-disc set as well, with the second disc being a bonus disc, which I'm not sure if it's going to be. Well, I think the second disc will be region B, and the first one will be region free because it's a 4K disc. But yeah, that's a huge undertaking. Then 12 Monkeys. I already have the original Arrow release from that, the Blu-ray, and that's already a great release. So if they're just going to make it look even better, that's even more fortuitous. For those of you who haven't bought it yet or don't own the movie, you've got your definitive edition coming out soon, so you might as well jump on that.
Yeah, and you Sam, you brought up Crimes of Lead, that release they had last year.
Yes.
So this release here of these two films, these Italian crime films, maybe this would be another one that'll be interesting too. You have Andrew's got the Crimes of Lead right next to him, of course. He always does.
Yeah, I already got stuff flying around.
Yeah, these two movies are done by the same director, Enzo G. Castellari, and it's The Big Racket and The Heroin Busters. So
I've got to say I'm really looking forward to those. I picked up the Blue Underground DVDs way back when. It's probably something awful like 20 years ago or something. Great films. Yeah.
Oh, okay, absolutely.
Cool. And I guess I end up really feeling very dependent on Arrow to really keep bringing all this stuff out, because I'm a huge. That's apart from British films of a certain era, Italian genre films from the 70s. That really does it for me.
I guess it's a good thing you don't have to buy any Indicator stuff, because because you're spending too much money on other labels.
We couldn't afford it.
And for those of you listening at home, the 8-Diagram Pole Fighter is also a film by Shaw Brothers. So if you've been collecting their Shaw Brothers releases, or if you've just gotten their Shaw Brothers set, this is obviously something to add to that collection that is slowly growing.
Yeah, that was another thing of beauty. That set was just off the scale, amazing.
Definitely. All right, well, let's go to our. This is it right here, guys. This is where you can get the skinny on some of the new stuff from Indicator. Just yesterday on Thursday, we got some new announcements from Indicator, and so we got two releases here. We got the Stanley Long's Adventures, a 70s sex comedy threesome, which I love that. I love that title. How you did it there. With 3 films,
doesn't it?
Yeah, it really flows great. And you got Adventures of a Taxi Driver, Adventures of a Private Eye, and Adventures of a Plumber Mate. And then you also have the other release, which is One for the Road, which is a single release that is from you guys will have to, because I'm scrambling. Okay, Chris Cook. Yeah, Chris
Yes.
Cook's the director.
Yeah.
And I think for some reason this one's not getting attention because everybody's paying attention to the other one. So I want you guys to go into, your thoughts behind these releases, because, and in no negative way, there's been a little bit of negative attention about this release. Some people being like, what are they doing? Like these kind of like sexy sex movies, why Indicator doesn't do this isn't the kind of stuff they put out. So go into the thought behind choosing these films as being, doing the next box set on this.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because I suppose we have a certain perspective which is not necessarily shared by all collectors, all viewers, or anyone who's interested in cinema has their highways or their particular paths or interests, and it's probable that not many people will span across all kind of numbers of genres and so on and so forth. But I don't know. I think for us, we just try not to differentiate too much. We're quite democratic in our approach. We're interested in exploring the histories. And of course, they're multiple and various, and they overlap in certain ways. So, it's kind of fascinating when watching, say, the Adventures films. That certainly if you're an English viewer of a certain vintage, you'll just recognize all the actors, and like, someone like Elaine Page turns up in them. And she, for anyone listening in the UK, they'll know her for, being in many, many musicals and doing a dedicated show on Sundays on Radio 2. So just it's all these big, dinosaurs, unexpected faces who turn up in films which, by some reckoning, by some of the responses on some of the forums, are, I guess some people think of them as trash or as not worthy. Whereas it's the same with our Fu Manchus. People were divided when we did the Fu Manchu box set. And, I can totally appreciate that, these things aren't for everyone. But I think the important thing to acknowledge and recognize about these films, and this doesn't necessarily mean that you want to watch them, but that they were an important part of British cinema history. And, there's something very specific that happens around the turn of the era from the 60s into the 70s, where in effect, the short story is all the studios who previously kind of got bitten by the Brit bug and, about the Beatles and the Stones and British culture and the swinging 60s and London and everything. They started to see all these filmmakers like Dick Lester and et cetera, making way more and more wacky films. You got, Nick Rogue coming along and just blowing people's minds. And in the end, they just kind of went, we're out. This is just getting crazy. This is not commercial anymore. This is just crazy and mad. Films like Petulia with George C. Clarke, those kind of great movies. But, and then really what happens is, you've got the Eadie levy, which is a kind of tax on cinema seats, and, you would make so much from the ticket, and it would get plowed back into British filmmaking, and all these things started to change, and the landscape of film production and the way the films were funded changed. And really, in a nutshell, what happened in the 70s is people just said, well, how can we make money? And really, what happened is you kind of get the growth of a kind of horror movies or kind of exploitation movies that people like Pete Walker or Norman J. Warren were making. And then on the other hand, you've got someone like Stanley Long, who made a horror movie, Scream Time, but who's predominantly known for making these sexploitation movies. And I guess for us, we just think that's part of the story. And I think that they have some merit. I think that they're very interesting. They're certainly sort of fascinating time capsules. And I think the difficult part of the conversation is that they represent some things that we find very difficult and slightly reprehensible in terms of their attitudes and so on and so forth. But I guess our position is that we're not going to pretend that stuff didn't happen or try and gloss over it or say that it shouldn't ever see the light of day or try and censor it. And so, yeah.
It's interesting.
I don't want to get into kind of like trying having to apologize for them, because I don't think
you should.
You shouldn't have to.
I was going to say, it's interesting how people have a hard time getting into something that's about sex, but violence is okay. We can do tons of movies about violence, and people are excited about it. But when it's like movies about sex, people get a little bit squirmish, and then they're like, that's just glorified porn.
Well,
And
I think our guests can speak to this more easily or more correctly. Just the history of English cinema and stuff has always had an issue when it comes to violence and that type of aesthetic. There's been films that have been banned there for those reasons for many, many years. We're talking about like video nasties and all that kind of stuff, which is all around kind of this late, era of the 70s and 80s, coincidentally enough. But for me with this set is that it is kind of a time capsule of a set. It really is. It's showing, the films of that era, specific films of that era in a specific subgenre of the kind of the not sleazy sex comedies, but kind of raunchy sex comedies of the time to a certain extent. It's not as exploitative as I think some may think. And I don't think the films are unwatchable in any way. I know there's been so much negativity around these films. If you just look up their ratings on IMDb, they're all lowly rated, and I'm like, they're not without any type of merit in that regard. And also, like you were saying, they are kind of part of their time. And what I think, Indicator has been doing has been giving us a lot of films from certain eras that are very much historical pieces. The Columbia Noir sets, they're all from that specific era. The Hammer sets are all from, a specific era of a specific studio within British cinema history. So I think there really needs to be, maybe not needs to be, but I would recommend film fans out there everywhere, whoever you are, however you describe yourself, just look at the history of cinema, and it really shows you kind of the ebbs and flows of the difference between American cinema versus British cinema. Because like you were saying, I believe, because I had it in college, briefly took a course where my professor was from England, and he just kind of gave us just tons of English cinema to go through, of like British realism and stuff like that of that era. And when we got to the 70s, he was like, it was kind of a downward period for British cinema. And then in the 80s, it kind of rose back up in terms of quality and things like that. And while in the US, it was kind of reversed. The 70s is kind of the revival.
Yeah.
And it's just very interesting how that works. But I wouldn't, for those of you listening, I've seen all the films. I watched them all in between, up into this. Are they great films? I would say perhaps not, but that's all based on your perspective. Are they a little bit dated? Certainly. But I think they're specific time capsule pieces that are interesting just to see kind of how the kind of the history of the sex comedy really has gone from the 70s to now.
I was going to say
a lot of things don't really change.
Just like the fact that, like a lot of, and this might get into some uncomfortableness right here, but if anybody watches porn out there, what's one of the most popular situations? The taxi guy picks up the lady, and then like
the unexpected scenarios,
the unexpected,
all those things.
I'm sure this had an inspiration, that's whether that's something anybody wants to talk about, it's fine. But
in the adult industry, they play on those fantasies and all of those things, and these films very much play on that, but almost to a ridiculous level.
But I think that one of the things that they do, which is typically British, is they kind of slightly undermine that as well. Like there's a kind of, I don't know, romantic idea that he thinks is going to be what he gets, but what he gets is a real kitchen sink version of that. And it's there's lots of stuff that doesn't go the way he wants it to go. I mean, on the one hand, you could say that there are these attitudes that aren't so great, which of course one would have to agree, but I think ultimately it doesn't necessarily play out the way you think it's going to play out, and it's actually in some ways kind of undoing the expectation that it would just kind of go swimmingly and he'd get everything that he wants. I actually would say about the films, Stanley Long was no fool. He was a really kind of quite brilliant producer, and I would say other films that he was involved in, like Groupie Girls and many other films, he could make a film. I mean, these are actually kind of very well put together films. And Adventures of a Taxi Driver took more at the UK box office than Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver.
Yes, it did. I read that.
Yeah.
And it spawned these sequels. And there's an argument to say that these are kind of the poor man's confessions movies. But it's all for me. It's all very interesting. And I think ultimately, what I would say is, it's just great to be able to put these things in a box, in the same way that we've done with Noir, in the same way we've done with Hammer or Mae West or Dietrich, etc. and just kind of tell the story, be robust about it, get some critical voices on there, put it into perspective. And
exactly.
I think, oftentimes people have a kind of a preconceived idea, whether it's a prejudicial kind of position or whether it's just, I don't know, for whatever reason. And I think oftentimes you can get into something and watch it and kind of start to understand where it's coming from. And I think that can be quite rewarding. Not to say that this is going to be everyone's cup of tea. I think clearly we knew that going in. But I think it's going to do okay. So
I think
I'm not concerned in the slightest.
No, I would.
It's rewarding. Yeah, it's always that's one of the main things as we bring it back around to the idea of how you guys choose things that are like hidden gems and things. That's the rewarding thing, is discovering something, even if it's not what you expected, but like. It's always
going
great
outside your comfort zone as well, I think.
Definitely.
And I don't just mean that in terms of what this set might represent to people, but I feel the same about, say, Bartleby that we're just about to publish, or, really almost any of the titles that we've just published in January, February. I think they're pushing the boundaries of expectation, I think, and also of, I think in a way it takes quite an adventurous viewer to sort of want to go deep. And as I say, it's not for everyone, and I can totally understand that. So it's not, but I think this is just part of what we do, and from time to time, there's the thing that gets more traction because I think it appeals to a wider base, and that's all good. That's great. We couldn't do without that. But I think we're always going to want to talk to this slightly more underrepresented or maybe misunderstood kind of area of not just British, but also American cinema. We try and do the same thing.
Very much so. And
I was going to say, John. I was going to get John involved because John's just sitting over there patiently. He's so patient.
Yeah, I almost want to I almost take over the show sometimes. So I gotta go back. I gotta reel myself in.
I mean, these kind of movies are just a huge part of British cinema. You've got the Carry On films, which were, all innuendo, but they were near the knuckle sometimes. And, and then you had the Comfort Away Misses, and you had the Confessions films. And then you've had, obviously, these are spin-off, the Adventures films. It's a big part of, of British culture. And, as Sam was saying, it put bums on seats. People went to the cinema just to be titillated, if you like, just to see these things. It really did put bums on seats, and it's steeped in history. And I think, we should. We definitely should. I mean, I realise it's, I've seen some comments that split. People have said, what are they doing releasing these? But listen, I don't think we're going to put every release out that everybody's going to love. There's a bit of controversy in this one, and who knows? We've got a couple of others coming down the line that might be even more controversial, but.
You're excited. You're getting me excited right now. I can't wait, because to me, like, people got to look at it in this way. You guys are the one investing. You're putting the investment in, and you know what you're putting out, and you're the one taking the risk here. And I think that that's something to acknowledge, that you guys are taking a risk with your audience to expand what it means to be, like I said earlier, it means to be loyal to the Indicator brand. And I think that's important in general. We should all be open-minded, and I think this is a good thing. You guys shouldn't want to keep getting the same stuff.
I mean, of course, just in case it doesn't come across very hugely grateful to, anyone that buys any of our editions. And, there are those incredibly loyal customers, which, as John was saying earlier, he sees those names rolling in, month out, and that's amazing. But we don't expect everyone to buy everything, and I think it would be foolish to think that would happen. But I guess we in maybe reaching our tendrils out further afield and doing some unexpected things. I guess we're just trying to cater to a range, a taste, a diversity of interest, and we'll see. I mean, I guess along the way, we're always learning lessons about the things, and ourselves discovering, wow, we need to do more of that. That's great. That really went down so well. Yeah. That really lands well. But before I forget, I think I don't want to finish talking about our new announcements without touching on One for the Road. Chris's
of course,
film. Of course. Chris is a lovely guy. I actually released this film the first time round when I was at Tartan, and was a huge admirer of it then. And I think it's one of those films that I just had on my long list of things that, I thought when we get to a point where we can perhaps be a little bit more adventurous, and go for things that we feel really strongly and passionately about, which, because it's not a lesser known quantity, it might not get the traction, again, to use that word, but I hope that people will take up on a film like this. It's a really great film. It's shot on DV cam, so, and then it was blown up to film, so it's got all this kind of quality differences. It looks very different to most obviously films shot on film, but it's a razor sharp kind of piece of work. It's just some great acting in there. Hill Bennett turns up in there, who's a godhead of British acting talent from the 60s and the 70s. It's just quite exceptional. But I think people's point of entry, it's difficult because what are the things that they can hook onto? I mean, Hill Bennett's a relatively known quantity, but beyond that, a relatively unknown director. But it's I think if anyone takes the jump, takes the leap, they'll be rewarded. It's a great film.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think, ultimately, when it comes to these releases, I think, as we try to expound on this show a lot is, we can't do all the work for everybody. We try to watch stuff and try to talk with people about what we think and stuff, but ultimately everybody needs to, if you're a collector of Blu-rays, I would assume people were interested in film. So you gotta put in the effort too, it's not only just about you guys curating, which I think, is important, that you have people that really love film and curating through these labels, but you also have to make up your own mind. So we can't be upset at Indicator for wanting to have a big swing here. I think this is some interesting, stuff that I always celebrate. I always celebrate when I see one of these labels, pull something that I didn't even see. I didn't see this coming. I was like, what? What are these?
Yeah.
That's what got I get excited about that stuff. But
well, you see, this is why, at the moment, all of the labels we've discussed, as I said earlier, hats off, a huge fan of all of those guys. But, the thing that's really continues to excite me is what guys, Vinegar Syndrome are just becoming huge and a real force to be reckoned with. But, right from the get-go, they've always been fascinating. As a Brit, being exposed to these kind of lesser, less well-known parts of quite obscure American filmmaking has just been a real joy. Some of the stuff they put out has kind of blown my mind. And then you've got Mondo Macabro, who just they just always, every single time I'm like, wow, what is that? I got to see that, So I guess that's just the thing that really does it for me. If someone brings something through that I don't really know what it is, but I can kind of, I guess I might know an actor or the director's name, or I might have heard of this film, but just never been able to see it. That for me, it's not what it's all about, but it's a key part, I think. I think that, as you say, this idea of curatorship, that's exactly what the guys at Vinegar Syndrome are doing and what Pete at Mondo Macabro is doing. And there's risk there, and I think,
yeah, definitely,
those guys, they're taking risks all the time. And I admire of that as a consumer,
Yeah. Well, guys, we very much appreciate you guys taking the time to talk with us.
My pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Thank you. We will keep pushing ahead. We talk about your stuff all the time. Sometimes we even compare it when we're talking about somebody else. We're comparing it. Look, if they can't do it like Indicator, I don't know what they're gonna like. Well, come on, guys. Like,
well, lucky us. Thank you very much.
Especially with box sets, because we very much appreciate the work that. Because I'm a big box set. If you can't see my shelf, but I have literally a whole shelf over there, just sets, and the work you guys do on sets is like bar none. Like it's the top notch. And
that's very kind. Thank you.
Yeah, and so just keep doing it. And
we will.
Yeah, I'm gonna hold you to it.
Yeah.
You want to see what's coming.
Yeah. And so with that said, I don't want to say that you guys have a place that anybody can necessarily contact you easily. So I don't know if there's any place. I guess just where can we buy Indicator stuff?
Well, in a wider and wider range of outlets. In the States now, I think all major and indie online retailers. I think a whole bunch of Barnes and Noble are starting to stock our titles as well.
Oh,
which
that's
is
good.
Exciting for us. Yeah. I don't think all, but I think there's a significant number in some of the bigger places.
Okay.
So yeah. And then in the UK, Amazon, Linewood Media site, which is Powerhouse films.co.uk.
Yeah. All right, Andrew.
Yes.
Where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter, on Twitter at Capzilla06, as well as our YouTube channel, Chasing Labels, and those are the two best places. And yeah, I just want to add, there is an ever expansive places now where you can find these releases. So for those of you listening, they're more available now than they were a year ago in terms of availability, and that's something that we didn't really touch on the show. But I'll say this: it's really nice to see them pop up in more places.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
And you can find me in the pub in 10 minutes time.
Oh, yes. Please take a picture and post it to social media so we know that you got there okay.
Right, we got there okay, yeah.
And you can find me on Facebook, Stephen Billings, or you can find me at the other Chasing Label stuff, whether it be our Twitter, Instagram. You can find the audio for the podcast on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. Thanks again for listening. And hey, keep on watching them movies.
I know I will.
And me too.
Sam, you better watch the movies.
I'll watch the movie. Don't you worry.